to talk about some of those teams that qualified. We obviously had some surprises. Clearly, the biggest one is Astralis. So talk to me about Astralis and why they are not actually going to be present in this next stage of the event.
One of the problems Astralis has had ever since they changed to this iteration, so I'm including even when they had Locky at the last major, right after the last major, sorry, the last major was the last one where they had Dupree and Magisk and those guys. Basically, the number one problem that team had was not enough firepower, unfortunately. And even when they added Farlig, it added a bit more firepower, but the problem is he's not an elite AWPer, he's just like a sort of above average / good AWPer. So it means that when he plays some of the smaller teams, he can be all right, but generally, they still haven't really figured out the lineup. They haven't really got like, there's the reason why, if you notice, the main approach you probably see on Twitter, if you're just in the esports space, is it's always just people speculating who Astralis should add. It's always like, what if they added this guy, or what if this guy, what if they remade this? No one's saying like, keep this lineup's got the time, it's got the, so the problem really is this whole team, even when they had Locky, even when they've made to change to Farlight, it's sort of been a non-starter. So basically this was the worst version of it, because the one player who puts up the numbers is BlameF.
Right.
But the problem is his style, in theory, is a pretty resource heavy style. So he is actually doing a great job, by the way. He's doing his job completely, no matter whether they win or lose. He's always putting up the numbers. It's just that they're not like necessarily the numbers that will always win you the game if he frags out. It's more like he's, to me, he like establishes the base of the team, and then you need like another big name. It could be Config on the right map. You'd hope it would be Farlight because the AWP. You need that guy to get you over the top. And unfortunately, they didn't have it. Like everyone else except for BlameF played very poorly at the event. The team in general, some of the older guys look like they've got some issues. I suspect their head's not in the game totally. And so, yeah, believe it or not, like, if you look at the teams they played against, they were supposed to get through this phase of the tournament. Like, absolutely. I mean, obviously, at the end, the joke was, if people don't know, even when they used to have, like, the Team Liquid that barely had any of the TL players in, and Astralis only had a few of them, but even they still used to lose to Astralis. There really was like a psychological block. So the idea that like Astralis in the last match to get through lost to Team Liquid, the team that they owned for about half a decade, that's sort of fitting. It's a way of telling you this isn't your dad's Astralis. This is a new team, and unfortunately, this one is actually exactly what it is. It was a borderline team that could have gotten through, but it didn't get through. So I actually think it's a bit of an underperformance, especially if you look at like names like Bad News Eagles that no one knew.
Right.
But even so, when you look at the actual matches, this is sort of like not even the absolute bottom floor of Astralis. They can have games like this from time to time, unfortunately.
Were there any other teams, before we move on to the next stage, that you thought would get through that didn't, perhaps forZe or this iteration of MIBR?
I actually had forZe as my team getting through. The problem they had was this, and this is so reminiscent of last year, but in the next phase, in the Legend stage we're about to do now, what Team Spirit did, because it was the same thing. Team Spirit actually got eliminated in the last match by the aforementioned Astralis. They actually won the game. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because of this. Because Team Spirit were technically the better players at the time. Their players were actually like better fragging. If you put them in a random online cop, they probably beat Astralis. But here's the key thing. If you'll notice, this is where a lot of the analysts made here with their predictions. Even though when you put someone like forZe, who looked like they were the much better team, up-and-coming squad, like a bunch of players fragging out their mind in the tournament. The problem is they're all nobodies when it comes to majors. Meanwhile, Imperial, who, yeah, everyone's laughing at, it's the last dance, who cares, they're all washed. Yeah, but here's the difference. They've been in those spots 1 million times. Like, that is a real edge you can use against the underdog. Like, what fans don't seem to realise there is any edge you get in the game, you put the pressure on them. Anytime they're behind, you put the pressure on them. When you're getting rolled over, you know they're going to give you a chance to get back in the game. So I will say, I do think forZe was a classic example of the team where it's like their problem is they needed to win before the last match. Once it got to the last match, they just let the pressure build up way too much. If you notice, unfortunately, in all the best of threes, because of the seeding, they had big names essentially. So I actually thought there was a world where forZe could have snuck through. They actually looked pretty good in some of the matches. Like I thought they were playing some good CS, but I think inexperience is what cost them. So to me, look for the next major for that team, maybe.
forZe also had, I would say, a relatively more difficult path to get through, considering that 4 of the 5 matches they played were against teams that actually did end up qualifying. So that's a pretty challenging gauntlet in the Swiss stage as well, and they were still on the brink.